Hi, good morning, guys. So today we'll be doing 3 units, which are very short because only 3-4 questions have been asked up until the past 3 years from them. And then we'll quickly switch to a toppers copy. I have taken up Priyansha Garg's copy, and we'll be doing the first test that she's written from paper one, because understanding that test one is very important from the syllabus point of view. You have a lot of questions that you get from there, so we'll do this test. Okay, we'll see how toppers approach it, and this is done because a lot of you requested for the same. So we'll quickly cover the 3 units, which are the unit 1 of paper 2, which is the historical background, unit 3 of paper 2, which is the PSUs, and you are left with one unit from the financial administration, financial management topic, which is the financial management, which is unit 9, paper 2. Okay, so let's get started with financial management, and then we'll see how to proceed with the other units. So the first question from this unit is, which was asked for this year, only a 10 marker. So the question was, computerization of treasuries has revolutionized the accounting and budget planning process. Comment. So the overall question is on computerization per se, right? In specific, how the treasuries have been computerized, and it has led to a sort of a revolution in terms of the accounting and the budget planning process. Nothing but how computerization has done this. So we'll be talking only about the advantages of computerization per se, and in specific, we'll try to link it to treasuries if possible. And just make sure that we try to include certain keywords if we can. So for example, okay, let's start. So for example, if keywords such as globalization 4.0, IR 4.0, that'll be better. Okay. Introduction, body, conclusion. Introduction: the landscape of accounting and budget planning has undergone a paradigm shift with the integration of treasury computerization, with the influence of globalization 4.0 and industrial revolution 4.0. Body. In the main body, we talk about how it has revolutionized the accounting and budget planning process, because this is the only thesis statement. It is only a 10 marker. So computerization of treasuries has revolutionized the accounting and budget planning process as follows. And then you start with the basic advantages of computerization. So first and foremost would be the enhanced accuracy, as it reduces the errors in financial calculations. Second, real-time data management. Third, transparency and accountability. Fourth, in the bracket, you can write down World Bank's pillars of good governance, because there's nothing much to value add in such questions. So try to incorporate whatever you can. Assessing efficiency as well as effectiveness. It enhances visibility into the financial transactions. If you also want to include it to the fourth E, so you can say that because of computerization and transparency and accountability, the fourth E, which is equity, also gets fulfilled, because everybody is at par with the relevant information and there's less scope for corruption, misuse, etc. Then you can see better accounting process with computerization leads to a sound auditing process. You can also talk about how the public display of information would therefore lead to a better social audit. So transparency would automatically lead to public display of information, which would then lead to a inherent or implicit social audit. Right, because there's no much value addition that you can do. So just try to include the keywords from your public administration as much as you can. Efficient financial management and risk management, as it improves identification and mitigation of financial risks. You can talk about the incorporation of artificial intelligence that can happen as a suggestion, and how it can predict the risks. So predictive analysis can happen. Predictive analytics, which will help in identifying and mitigating the risks thereafter. Whole of the government approach in the budgeting process means all ministries can work together as one. So this is another keyword that you can use. Getting feedback on the budgeting process makes it more participative. So you can here also talk about the another pillar, which is participation. And then feedback, you can try to link it to Chris Argyris. So you can say that the Chris Argyris's feedback loop can be implemented here, which will then lead to a continuous and a cyclical process. No malfeasance or misfeasance due to computerization of accounting and budgeting process, leading to lower lowering instances of corruption. You can also say how this leads to decrease in misuse of power and abuse of power, right? You can also say that because it's computerized, so there's less time gap that takes place, and everything is within a time frame because it is displayed in the system. So you have less red tapeism as well. You can also talk about how all the other characteristics of bureaucracy, negative characteristics of bureaucracy, have been countered, right? Reporting generates timely and accurate financial reports, allocates resources more effectively. Decision support, as it provides data for informed decision making. You can also here, whenever you're talking about decision making, bring in Simon's rational decision making, right? You can also say there are two kinds of decisions, programmed and non-programmed. So programmed can easily be done by the what do you call it, computerization. So we have more time for non-programmed decisions to be taken by the concerned bureaucrats, right? So this again improves the scope for better strategic analysis of things. Please try to include all such keywords as far as possible, and this will only better your answer, right? Because in such answers, you don't have much to do. Bring out one or two examples. I'm mentioning a lot of examples here. So, but in your examination, only one or two would suffice. So, for example, you have the CFMS, that is the Computerized Financial Management System by the Andhra Pradesh government. We all know about GSTN, Goods and Services Tax Network, by the central government. You have IFMS, which is the Integrated Financial Management System in Kerala. ECOBARE system by RBI. Also, this is something which you know. Similarly, you also know about PFMS, which is the Public Financial Management System. So, GSTN, ECOBARE, PFMS, you all know. You can have these two as value additions, and then use them in your future answers. Also, before moving to the conclusion, there's another. So if you want to stand out, you can include another dimension, which is problems with the computerization. And because it's only a 10 marker, I think maximum 2 points suffice, because then you'd also want to come out with the solution. So it'll be 4 points in total, and it's only a 10 marker. So do you guys have any suggestion on what the 2 points could be? What do you think would be the problems with computerization? Two basic problems. One, try to include it as a keyword. Just think on the lines of what computerization as a problem would be. And second, you can talk about any generic problem of computerization. Any suggestions from your end? Niyati or Navdeep? Guys, I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
ठीक है, तो कुछ तो मतलब you might have something in mind, right? Any generic problem of centralization से क्या होगा, मतलब वो computerization से क्या होगा? हमें ई
Sir,
गवर्नेंस बड़ी प्रॉब्लम पड़ता
data
है।
data piracy.
हम ठीक है, आप साइबर सिक्योरिटी पे बोल सकते हो, डेटा पायरेसी तो नहीं, बिकॉज it we cannot, because it's at the end of the day the government that is taking it, right? So overall
Yes, sir.
problem of cybersecurity, you can say that the servers etc. can be hacked, which where the government stores the data. That's okay.
Sir,
Uh,
infrastructure कम है अभी, digital infrastructure.
Very good. So digital infrastructure plus you have digital literacy, which is less. Okay. Plus you need skilled personnel for digital infrastructure. So skilling is also less. These are the generic problems. How about there's this problem that we study in e-governance, is decentralization. Do you guys know about it? I think we've also discussed it in some other class.
Yes, sir.
Yes, so there's another problem which can happen. So this can be a keyword-based approach wherein the examiner will see, and then second would be the generic problems which you can point out, and then come out with the solutions of the same as well. Okay. So this is another dimension that you can add in this question. None. So the conclusion, ease of accounting or budgeting process where computerization is crucial for sound financial management and policies, and leveraging the role of technology in the era of Industrial Revolution 4.0. In the era of digital revolution भी लिख सकते हैं, कुछ भी लिख सकते हैं. Yes, did we all understand this question? Can I move on to the next one?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Second. Second is a very simple question. Accountability of the executive to the parliament in the domain of financial administration is secured through CAG reports. Discuss. The CAG reports basically ensure the accountability of the executive to the parliament in terms of financial administration. So how does executive ensure its accountability to the parliament or the legislature How is accountability ensured? And it is done through CAG reports. This is basically the question. You have to discuss it. Discuss में आप बताओगे कि भाई what is the process, because it's a 20 marker, so you have to talk about a lot of things. You have to fill in 4 pages. So you can't just talk about the overall how does the accountability is ensured. So first you'll talk about the process. What is CAG? How does CAG lay down the reports? What is the process around the CAG reports? Now, once you've done the process, now you establish how accountability is ensured. So because it's deliberated, discussed, overall audits are done, proprietary, what regulatory, etc. Different types of audits is done. So we have accountability is ensured. Then where it's discussed, it's a 20 marker. Talk about the problems as well. So overall problems with CAG and overall problems with CAG reports. So for example, CAG ki the problems and CAG reports as well. So uh, they are not put to action. There's no action taken. All of this. So whatever generic problems we study around CAG, and I think you've already had a session on CAG. So this will be helpful. And then come out with the way forward or solutions for the same, and we conclude because it's a 20 marker. So please try to include every and each and every aspect. Yes, this was the structure as far as the question is concerned. This is the main demand, but again, it's a 20 markers. You have to go around this, then establish it with this, then problem solutions is obvious. Fair enough. Yes, so introduction, basics of CAG, body functioning of CAG, thesis statement. Thesis statement is this: how is accountability ensured? Then challenges, way forward, and conclusion. This is what you have exactly written. Okay. Introduction. CAG, which is the Controller and Auditor General in India, is one of the important bulwark of the Indian Constitution, which helps the Parliament for ensuring the executive accountability, especially in terms of financial administration, because this is exactly what the question is asking. Okay, also this one keyword you can learn. CAG is one of the important bulwarks of Indian democracy, of Indian Constitution. So this bulwark keyword can be taken in handy in other areas as well. Okay. Article 148 to 151 of the Constitution, along with DPC Act, this is nothing but the powers, duties, privileges, etc. of the Controller Auditor General of India. So Article 148 to 151 of the Constitution, along with the DPC Act of 1971, deals with the powers and functions of the CAC in India. It is the institution through which the accountability of the government and other public authorities, government, which is a part of the executive, and other public authorities, which is also executive, all those who spend public funds to the parliament and state legislatures and through them to the people is ensured. This is very important that you've moved away from the question. You're saying that executive has two things. So government as well as other public authorities, their uh, accountability is not only ensured to the parliament, also to the other state legislatures. And this whole process leads for us to ensure accountability to the people themselves. Right? This is very important for you to establish. Because at the end of the day, we are nothing but a autochthony. What does autochthony mean? That our preamble talks about we the people. So we are deriving our power out of people themselves, right? So therefore, the ultimate source of accountability should be ensured to ultimate destination where the accountability needs to be ensured is towards the people. Right. So in one line, you've established everything as far as the democratic setup is concerned in terms of accountability and the end goal of it. Now we'll directly hit on the thesis statement, just in pertinence to CAG. Now talk about CAG in general. So the CAG conducts three types of audit: audit on finance, audit on appropriation, and audit on the public sector undertakings. Audit report on public undertakings published by the CAG. CAG produces more than 100 audit reports annually, which includes the different kinds of audits. So you have, just a second. Yes. So you have performance audit, you have value for money audit, and you have audit reviews on the civil departments, defense, railways, receipts, public sector undertakings, autonomous bodies, institutions of the union government, and separate reports for each state. Nothing but nothing fancy, but you just have to mention in short the different types of audits that the CAC undertakes and the different places where the audit takes place. Now, this is not as important as this is. So this is the main demand: how accountability of the executive of the parliament in the domain of financial admission is secured through CAG reports. This is the main demand of the question. So this is the overall thesis statement, and you're now starting to justify this. Also, if the process, instead of this, we could also explain the process as to where the CAG report is submitted. It is submitted to the president, and from the president to the parliament, and parliament to the select committee, and then the committee will come out with its own understanding of the CAG report, etc., etc. Okay. Okay. How is the accountability ensured? Because it leads to debates, it leads to discussions, it leads to deliberations over the reports. You can also talk about, if I'm not too, I'm not too sure about it, but I think the Vice President of India talked about certain number of Ds, either it was 4 Ds or 3 Ds in the parliament, right? So I think this was around debate, discussion, and deliberation only. So you can also mention the honorable vice presidents in the bracket. Second, CAG reports also exposed issues of corruption, misappropriation of funds, policy arbitrariness, etc. For instance, in the 2G scam, coal allocation scam case, etc. Third, CAG reports contribute to transparency in the government financial operations, fostering trust in the democratic process and leading to uh, decrease in the deficit of trust between the people and the government, which is very, very necessary in a democracy. Fourth, reports highlight any irregularities, financial mismanagement, or discrepancies in the use of public funds. CAG thoroughly examines government expenditures, ensuring compliance with financial regulations. Performance audits, as CAG goes beyond financial compliance to evaluate the efficiency as well as the effectiveness of the government programs and activities. Also, we've already talked about 4Es. So you can also talk about how not only economy, uh, but also efficiency, effectiveness is needed. And only when the 3 Es are first ensured can we lead to a fourth E in a development welfare oriented state, which is equity. Also in bracket, it is better if you write down the corresponding goals of it. So for example, economy is related to expenditure. Talk about how efficiency is related to output. So performance audits not only relate to outputs, but also to outcomes. Have you already discussed the difference between outputs and outcomes?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. So you please try to mention this so that the examiner knows that you what do you better want understand by performance audit. Then public disclosure, as CAG reports are made public, promoting transparency and allowing citizens to be informed about how their tax money is utilized. Follow-up action, as the parliament can take up follow-up actions based on CAG reports, ensuring corrective measures are implemented by the executive. So this is how we are saying that the accountability of the executive to the parliament in the domain of financial administration is secure through the CAG reports. Now, because it's a 20 marker, we've also talked about how we need to talk about the negatives as well. So now directly let's talk about the limitations as far as the CAG or the CAG reports is concerned. First, we know that we have called it as fault finding rather than fact finding. I think this is also called by, yes, this is what second ARC also called it. It said that CAG reports have become fault finding rather than fact finding. CAG has become a fault finding institution rather than a fact finding institution. They have a bloodhound type attitude or approach. So this is one of the biggest weaknesses. Second, it lacks hindsight as it does not audit by taking into consideration the past situation, whereas auditing is done mere from a present perspective. Because it's done post facto, so they do not place themselves in the situation in which it happened, and they look at it from a present perspective. So, for example, there was one IAS officer who was removed from his services in Rajasthan because when he sold a property, when he sold a government property as a hotel, at that time the rates of the land was very low, and and he sold the property according to those rates. However, when the CAG audit was conducted, it was realized that the rates of the land has increased, and they looked at it from the present date and then charged the IS officer that he has sold it for a less price. So this was the problem, and this still exists. So yes, it lacks hindsight, and as it does not audit by taking into consideration the past situation, whereas auditing is done merely from the present perspective. Also, CAG was criticized by Paul Appleby that auditing by CAG is highly pedestrian functions. Auditing is not administration, and auditors do not know what is administration. So you can just learn this word, pedestrian functions. Overall, the technical expertise, etc., is not. Uh, it's too much, whereas administrative expertise is too less. CAG reports have been criticized for its own accountability, that its reports and findings in especially ambiguous words are used in the report. So we are trying to say that ambiguity plays a lot of role. There's a lot of scope for subjective interpretation of words. There's no objectivity, right? So, for example, if you see, you can there was this word mentioned, estimated loss in the 2G reports. Now what does estimated mean? You have to come out with a quantifiable, this is also what we talk about in citizens charters, right? That we have to come out with quantifiable, specific, measurable uh, goals or objectives that we have to achieve. If you keep them as ambiguous as this, then you don't know what it is, right? So estimated loss could mean anything, and this would open to subjective interpretation. So you can hold no one accountable. So this is another problem. And the problem is some kind of biasness and lack of standards in the reports. So because at the end of the day, it's nothing but a human producing a report. So you say that you have your own prejudices and biases, and there's no standardized procedure because you're not comparing it to the international practices, etc. That's another weakness. Reports of CAG are not well discussed and deliberated in the parliament. That's true. So this as well, right? You also have a lot of other limitations. You can include any as you wish to. What would be the way forward? So, as per the National Commission to Review the Working of the Constitution, which is nothing but the NCRWC, National Commission to Review the Working of the Constitution, a multi-member board for CAG's organization. So, you need a multi-member board, and an audit board should be constituted for better discharge of the vital function of public audit. So you need a multi-member board and an audit board. It added that the number of members to be appointed, the manner of their appointment and removal, and other related matters should be dealt with by appropriate legislation. So you need to have a specific legislation, which although we already have in the duty powers, etc., but you still need an appropriate legislation as far as the number of members of the board, the audit board, as well as the multi-member board of CAG would be concerned. So you need number of members, you need the manner of appointment. So overall generic how soever we have it for any other statutory body, right? There's also a suggestion to appoint specialists as CAGs. For examples, officers from the ICAS services, which we already have under the domain of UPSC Civil Services Examination Recruitment. The ICAS officers should be appointed as CAG officers because they are specialists in the domain. So this is nothing but domain specialization, domain functional specialization concept, which was also brought down by second ARC.
Sir,
हाँ जी.
sir, can we write about in way forward that CAG should be given controller power, like in UK?
You can, but again, do you think that that's the number of solutions that you're providing, would that be wise? Because because when you mention this statement, it is in direct contravention to what the constitution makers envisaged at that point of time,
Okay, sir.
right? If you can justify it, well, you can, but there's no evident need because at the end of the day, the controller is better than CAG in India, which is the parliament, right? So if you go on to claim that parliament is not better than CAG, then that's a problem. Yes.
Okay, sir.
हाँ जी, ठीक है. So the Public Account Committee at the union level need to have a say in the appointment of CAG, and a cooling off period needs to be established for the retired bureaucrats. Second, ARC has suggested some reforms such as a fact-finding approach rather than a fault-finding approach, something which you already discussed in challenges. There should be a committee of parliamentarians to assist the CAG reports for technical and specific expertise for decoding the CAG report, etc. PAC should assist for quality improvement in the CAG reports. To conclude, we can say in brief, CAG reports enforce executive accountability through independent audits, revealing irregularities, and presenting findings to the Parliament, ensuring transparency and responsible financial management, ultimately to the sovereign in India, which is nothing but the people. And then again, you can mention the keyword called a talk thing. If you've already done that in the introduction, you can do away with it, but in the conclusion, you can. Contemporary development its autonomy from executive. Yes. Did we understand this question? There were 20 markers, so we included everything as far as the CAG was concerned. And we move on to the next one.
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Let's move on to the third question now. Yes. The third question is CAG is today a primary cause of widespread and paralyzing unwillingness on the part of government institutions to decide and act. Nothing but a very similar question. So you have to talk everything as far as the CAG is concerned. It's a 20 marker, so go for everything. So CAG, Comptroller and Auditor General, is today a primary cause of widespread and paralyzing unwillingness on the part of government institutions to decide and act. So you have to basically talk about how the three C's, codes, CAGs, etc., as envisaged by the finance minister in the budget speech, uh, leads for a policy paralysis in terms of government institutions to not act. So you know that executives are under a fear of CAG audits, and that is why they do not take new initiatives, which they can't justify, and that is why they only keep on going with things which are already decided and which are already in the loop. So they just follow the uh, process which was already established, and they do not look forward to anything which is new. Therefore, we come up with this concept called as paralyzing unwillingness on the part of the government institutions to decide and act. ठीक है. Again, very basics, whatever we've discussed previously. So introduction, basics of CAC, thesis statement, discuss. In the discuss, we would also say that no, because it's a 20 marker, so we would also present the other view, wherein we'll say that it is, although this happens, but we can only better on the as far as the actions of the executive is concerned. And therefore, CAG is although needed, but we can only make them sensitive enough to realize that CAG will not detriment their functions if they do it for. So this is where also the concept of when we talk about how corruption led to this. I'm forgetting the word, but there was two kinds of misfeasance and malfeasance which the Supreme Court judgment came out with. तो आप ये बोल सकते हो कि tag is still necessary to ensure accountability, which is the primary motive of or basic pillar of a good governance. ठीक है? Okay. And then we'll discuss the way forward and conclusion. Similarly, starting with the introduction that we've already done before. So CAG is one of the important bulwark of the Indian Constitution, which helps the Parliament ensuring the executive accountability. Article 140 and 151 of the Constitution, along with the DPC Act 1971, deals with the powers and functions of the CAG. The CAG conducts three types of audit on finance, appropriation, public sector undertakings. It is an institution through which the accountability of the government and other public authorities to the Parliament, legislatures, and through them to the people is ensured. Again, a talk to me, and this is something which you've already cut copied from the previous slide. ठीक. How is it now? How is CAG today a primary cause of widespread and paralyzing unwillingness on the part of the government institutions? If you do not wish to make the heading so big, you can just say CAG is a primary cause of unwillingness on the part of government. That's it. Okay? And then you make the heading and you start. First is institutional overreach by interfering in policy question. So we say that why there is unwillingness, because we perceive CAG to have an institutional overreach approach. CAG as an institution to have an overreaching approach because it starts to interfere in policy questions as well. Although its audit powers do not allow it to go beyond into the domain of why part of the policy, right? It only says whatever the policy was, whatever the amount to the policy was given, was that justified enough to the extent that it was used. So whatever, मतलब ये amount जितना भी आ गया, मान लो x है, तो ये आगे सही यूज हुआ है नहीं हुआ. But what CAG has started to do is that it has also started to question this x now. So this is what the government institutions see as an institutional overreach interfering in policy question. CAG began with the faulty premise that the government's guiding principle should have been revenue maximization. This is CAG's judgment of what the overall objective of government while framing a policy should be, which is revenue maximization. However, we know that in a welfare state, what we need is welfare maximization, right? So this goes in direct contravention to the principles that the governance should be run with. So governance does not always move along such straight lines. There are occasions when other imperatives such as public welfare takes precedence. For instance, in the UK and US, legislation establishes corresponding audit bodies firmly as agents of the legislative branch of the government. So we are saying that in the US and UK, to have such questions answered, the legislation in concern or the policy itself establishes how the audit would be done for such policies. Take a second, pre-independence hangover. This is nothing but a fancy word for the colonial aspects of the negative colonial aspects of the Controller and Auditor General as a body. So the CAG is the successor of the pre-independence Auditor General. Constitution made interim provisions rather than providing a final solution. Understandable given the ambiguities of governance in a fledgling republic. As per the constitution, the legislature who decides the CAG's remit. Parliament finally established the CAG's duties only in 1971 with the Controller and Auditor General's duties, powers, and conditions of services act. That is what we have already mentioned, DPC Act. CAG's DPC Act, Controller and Auditor General's duties, powers, and conditions of services act. Third, ambiguous relationship with the parliament. The legacy of the decades of ambiguity is an uneasy working relationship between the CAG and the Parliament, the body it is answerable to. The Parliament has been apathetic to both in its oversight and its usage of CAG reports. This is nothing but basically the negatives of basically inaction in Parliament, right? So to just put it down in words, the CAG has responded by often appropriating an outsized role for itself. Outsized role again as to overreaching roles. Now we'll talk about the counter view because it's a 20 marker and we have said that it is not only negative. So it is not due to the CAG audits, rather the inherent weaknesses of the government, such as, for instance, the coalition politics, which leads to the policy paralysis. So you're just saying that policy paralysis is not only happening because of CAG reports, but other things. And here we'll now start to talk about the successes of CAG, basically. Okay. At the same time, CAG has exposed corruption since 1950s and 60s, and the first scam was Jeep scam, and the prominent scams were 2G scam, coal scam, mother scam, etc. You know, all of these were brought down by CAG. Most recently, 50,000 crores scam in Noida in the state of UP for real estate underpricing and loss to the UP state was also unearthed by the Controller Auditor General in India. It has exposed malpractices, lack of wisdom in decision making, quality of policy, schemes and programs including MG Narega, midday meal scheme, MP lad schemes, etc. So nothing but successes of CAG. And this is the counter view because it's a 20 marker. To conclude, we are saying that the CAG since 1950 still present made a long journey and it has emerged as one of the most important institutions in Indian democracy. Thus, for effectiveness of CAG, there must be reforms in its appointment process by broad-based committee for ensuring democratic accountability of CAG and also to ensure its autonomy from the executive, something which we discussed previously as well and cut copied. Also, one more thing, because it's a 20 marker, please try to include the other negatives as well. So the we are only discussing one negative, which is how it is leading to a unwillingness on the part of the executive to act. You can also talk about other negatives like we've already done before. And in the solutions, please talk about the solutions that we've already done. So as far as the NCRWC is concerned, the committee, multi-member CAT committee, etc., etc. Okay. All depends on the space that you have. Then can you move on to the next question?
Yes, sir.
Fourth, budget proposals in the parliament or state legislatures fail to ensure the effective scrutiny. Identify the factors which constrain effective scrutiny of the budget proposals. It's a 20 marker question. The question is primarily on the declining standards of parliament, but the examiner just made it specific for you to discuss on in terms of budgeting. That's it. So we read a lot about the negatives of parliament when we study unit 3, right? Uh, it's that question only, and one point in that we study is related to budget. So for example, you have use of guillotine. All of such points that you don't have enough discussions, debates, you don't have enough expertise. So all of these points will still hold true. You just have to make them specific to budgeting, and just so whatever negatives you know, just mention them, and in the at the last of this point make it specific to budgeting. It is how as simple as this is. So the factors would be this only. So identify the factors. So we'll talk about the process of budget proposal in the parliament, then we'll talk about the factors which are leading to less effective scrutiny, then we'll talk about solutions and then conclude, right? So budget and legislature scrutiny, factors, way forward, and conclusion. Factors is nothing but the negatives or the challenges only, right? ठीक है. Introduction, budget is the most important tool of fiscal policy of the government body. Budget is a tool which becomes basis for all three different types of control exercised by legislature over the executive: general control, detailed control, as well as the financial control. Budget has two sides: estimate side and the expenditure side. There cannot be withdrawal of any money from the consolidated fund of India without the authorization by the parliament. Nothing but the power of purse. Please try to include as many keywords as you can so that your answer looks fancy. Fair enough. Now talk about accountability. So the parliamentary accountability means accountability of the executive to the parliament. In any democratic country, be it presidential or parliamentary, it is the legislature which exercises control over the executive. Like even in US budget, it is enacted by legislature, even if formulated by the executive. And in UK, India, the legislature approves the budget. So you've established parliamentary accountability in the case of a democracy as far as the specifics of budget is concerned. The Constitution of India prescribes, now you talk about the India specific context as far as the budget is concerned. So the Constitution of India prescribes the procedures to get legislative approval for raising and spending money. The instruments are the annual financial statement or the budget, that as we generally call it, the demand for grant with details of expenditure, the appropriation bill to formally approve expenditure, and the finance bill spelling out how revenue is to be raised. Please try to include all of this because this is a basic process. It's a 20 marker. So your inclusion is necessary. So annual financial statement, demand for grant, appropriation bill, as well as the finance bill. The Lok Sabha has the power to assent or to reject any demand or to assent to any demand subject to reduction of the amount specified. After the conclusion of the general debate on the budget, the demand for grants of various ministries are presented in the Lok Sabha. Now we are talking about, we have established how it's presented. Now we'll talk about how despite the presentation, there is less effective scrutiny. First and foremost, there is guillotine. This is the basic that we've all known and read. And its frequent use undermine the parliamentary control. Nowadays, 20-25% of the budget is discussed only, and the rest of the budget is passed without any debate and discussion with the use of guillotine. Okay, so this is one of the major reasons why there's a constraint on the effective scrutiny. Second, the task is made more difficult by the growth and complexity of the government functions. The size of government revenue and expenditure is increasing exponentially. Yes, the size and of government revenue and expenditure is increasing exponentially. The competing demand on Parliament's time and frequent interruptions to its functioning when in session deny full and in-depth discussion of various budgetary issues. We are just saying that because the government functions are increasing and there is frequent interruptions in the Parliament. This is another negative, right? Frequent interruptions, and because the government functions are increasing, they want to focus more on other aspects. Therefore, there's a reduction in time and in frequent interruptions, which lead to a less effective scrutiny of the budget. We are establishing this point so that when we give out solutions, we can say that you need more time in the parliamentary sessions. This is again third point, extrapolating on this time constraints. The budget proposals are usually presented a few weeks before the start of the financial year, and the parliament or state legislatures have limited time to scrutinize, debate, as well as pass the budget. This time constraint often results in a superficial examination of the budget, with members being unable to delve deep into the details and implications of various proposals. Fourth, limited expertise. The members of parliaments, MPs, as well as the state legislatures are representatives of the people and may not necessarily have the required expertise in financial matters or economic policy. This makes it difficult for them to analyze the budget proposals effectively and suggest necessary changes. So the time constraints as a limited expertise. Time constraints का solution क्या होगा कि थोड़ा पहले budget को present करें. Limited expertise का solution क्या होगा that you have specialized committees that review the budget and discuss. Lack of research support as well. This is nothing but extrapolating on limited expertise only. So the MPs and state legislatures often do not have adequate research support to help them understand the nuances of the budget proposals. The parliament and state legislatures in India do not have a dedicated research wing similar to the, also this is one good example, please note it down, Congressional Research Service in the US, which provides in-depth analysis and reports on various policy matters, including the budget. So wherever you want to include how parliament lacks in some analysis or some research, you can always quote this, that there's a Congressional Research Service in the US, which not only evaluates the budget but also other policies. So we need one such service for India as well, which will now lead us to have less time constraints, will also lead us to countering limited expertise, and will also counter the lack of research support. Talk about the solutions. So to overcome these constraints and ensure effective scrutiny of the budget proposals, the following steps can be taken. First and foremost, allow more time for budget scrutiny. The parliament or state legislature should have more time to scrutinize, debate, and pass the budget, allowing for a more detailed examination of the proposals. Enhance the research support. The parliament and state legislature should have a dedicated research wings that provide in-depth analysis and reports on various policy matters, including the budget. Third, encourage public debate and participation. Also, one of the negatives could have been the less involvement of public. You only see big business organizations being involved in the process of budgeting in India. So we need more public participation. Public debate and participation in the budget making process should be encouraged, with civil society organizations and think tanks playing a more significant role in analyzing and disseminating information about budget proposals. Strengthening the parliamentary committees. The capacity of parliamentary committees to scrutinize budget proposals should be enhanced by providing them with adequate resources, expertise, and time. Improve the transparency. The budget proposals should be presented in a more transparent and accessible manner, allowing for easier understanding and analysis by the parliament, legislators, and the public. You know, that it is just presented to the parliaments a few hours before, right? So to ensure better transparency, give them at least a couple of days or a week to scrutinize and then come and discuss in the parliament. Conclusion, the parliamentary control over the budget is at the core of the financial accountability of the executive, which requires strengthening of the legislative systems, increased number of sittings, debate and discussions, equipping the committees, etc., are some measures that can be taken in this regard. Did we understand this? No, I've not sent the PDF of the solutions on the group. I've just sent the questions. After the class, I will be sending the PDF.
Hello.
Yes.
Dhruv sir, when we write solutions based on the challenges that we have given in the answer,
हाँ जी.
like basically the challenge is lack of research, and when we are writing the solution as we should provide some research support. So this would be a very generic point, right? If we don't write that congressional wing wala thing, so
Yes.
it would just appear to the examiner that we are reversing this, and this happens like with me also, that we tend to write solutions based on the challenges. So how can we make it more specific and just the examiner sees that it is value addition and not just reversing of the challenges?
No, so solutions have to be reversal of the challenges is irrespective of the validation. The only validation that you can do is give out some examples. So you've given a congressional research example in this case. Otherwise, in a solution, generally you can take up an example from Indian administration. So, for example, improve transparency. Take up a transparency example based on Indian administration. Okay, and it is not necessary for you to include value addition in every aspect because solutions have to be nothing but the reversal of the problems that you've given. So it's very understood and basic. Just try to include keywords as far as you can. For example, अगर हम यहाँ पे public debate and participation की बात कर रहे हैं, so we have included CSOs and think tanks. Try to include a provide concepts such as NPG or NPS here.
Okay, so in general, it is okay for us to write solutions based on just challenges. The examiner wouldn't see it. Logically, we should be writing that way only, but it is not necessary to add value addition in every point, right?
Yes, yes. Even in a couple of points, if you do that, out of so for example 5 points, or you do it in 2 points, that's enough. Also, ये so इस क्वेश्चन में तो हम उसका एग्जैक्ट ऑपोजिट ही लिखेंगे बट देयर आर सर्टेन क्वेश्चंस फॉर एग्जांपल यू हैव अ क्वेश्चन ऑन सिटीजन चार्टर इट्स ओनली अ 10 मार्क का क्वेश्चन नाउ द वेरी फैक्ट दैट यू
Hmm.
स्टडी इट इन टू मच डिटेल तो आप प्रॉब्लम्स मान लो आपने 5 लिखी but abhi bhi you feel that there are 10 problems from your basic content. If you feel that at least 2 3 problems are very important which are left, so you start your solutions with those problems का solution. समझ में आया? तो जैसे अगर आपने यहाँ पे वर्नाकुलर लैंग्वेज का इशू नहीं लिखा दैट लैंग्वेज इज
Hmm.
इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज यहाँ पे इशू नहीं लिखा बिकॉज यू ओनली हैड लिमिटेड स्पेस, तो आप यहाँ पे पहले 2 पॉइंट यू टॉक अबाउट सो वर्नाकुलर लैंग्वेज यहाँ पे होनी चाहिए, यहाँ पे क्वांटिफाइबल स्टैंडर्ड्स होने चाहिए अगर आपने यहाँ पे प्रॉब्लम में मेजर नहीं किया, फिर आप जो बाकी 2 प्रॉब्लम लिखोगे वो उनकी लिख दो बट वो उन क्वेश्चंस के लिए करना है विच यू हैव अ लॉट ऑफ कंटेंट ऑन विच यू थिंक द प्रॉब्लम्स हैव नॉट बीन इनफ एड्रेस्ड. बट इन सच क्वेश्चंस यू नो दैट यू हैव ऑलरेडी एड्रेस्ड इनफ ऑफ प्रॉब्लम्स, यू ऑलरेडी मेकन, मतलब आपने खुद ही बहुत सारे पॉइंट्स खुद बनाए हैं, मेड मोर पॉइंट्स, है ना? तो उस क्वेश्चन में जरूरत नहीं,
Hmm.
बट इन द क्वेश्चंस वेर यू फील दैट आर डायरेक्ट, सो जैसे सिटीजन चार्टर हो गया, आरटीआई हो गया, ये जो क्वेश्चंस होते हैं बहुत डायरेक्ट जिनमें हमारे पास बहुत सारी प्रॉब्लम्स होती हैं, उनमें आप सोल्यूशंस में भी दूसरी प्रॉब्लम्स के सोल्यूशन डाल सकते हो स्टार्टिंग में.
ओके, और एक और चीज ध्रुव सर, कभी कभी क्या होता है ना कि जो सोल्यूशन होता है वो इवन दो दैट इज अ वेरी जेनरिक पॉइंट, जैसे अवेयरनेस बढ़ा दो,
हाँ.
सिटीजन चार्टर फॉर एग्जांपल, बट
हाँ.
इवन दो द सोल्यूशन इज वेरी जेनरिक, इट इज इम्पोर्टेंट. तो जब
करेक्ट.
हम पॉइंट प्रायोरिटाइजेशन करते हैं ना कि लेट से मुझे सिर्फ 5 ही पॉइंट लिखने हैं,
हाँ.
बट मेरे हिसाब से वो लैक ऑफ अवेयरनेस वाला पॉइंट इंपॉर्टेंट है बट जेनरिक है. तो क्या मुझे वो टॉप पे लिखना चाहिए या फिर मुझे एकदम बॉटम में उसको लिखना चाहिए?
नहीं, आप उसको बॉटम में लिखना, जब जैसे आप सिटीजन चार्टर की बात करो तो सबसे पहला पॉइंट होना चाहिए कि भाई सेकंड एआरसी कॉल्स इट एज नथिंग बट, ये एक स्टेटमेंट है ना, पायस स्टेटमेंट्स हैविंग नोबल इंटेंशंस बट नो प्रैक्टिकल सिग्निफिकेंस, राइट? Although
ओके.
this is not as important as participation, but you know that everybody else would be writing participation or awareness.
हम्म हम्म
You
हम्म
have to do it away with. आप जो भी keywords वाली based approach है, anything which is new, anything which is specific, you have to write it first and then you write down the other things. So, for example, आपने
ओके.
4 पॉइंट लिख दिया, आपको कुछ नहीं आ रहा, तो now you write down awareness. Although it's important, but it's very generic. So ये जो पॉइंट हो गए आप कम से कम 4 बार ऑलरेडी यूज कर चुके होगे पेपर में, या अगर पहला
हम्म
क्वेश्चन
हम्म,
4 बार यूज करोगे, है ना? तो ये तो दिस इज अ प्रॉब्लम विद एवरी गवर्नेंस इनिशिएटिव. So don't try to do away with such generic problems as far as you have the content on it. But once you don't have the content, then you switch to such things. ऑल्सो इफ यू फील
Okay.
इंक्लूड करना ही है तो कहीं पे भी ट्राई टू लिंक इट। सो अगर आप जैसे अवेयरनेस की बात करोगे, हाउ व्हाट कैन यू लिंक इट विद? सो यू टॉक अबाउट पॉलिटिकल कल्चर बेस्ड ऑन कॉग्निशंस, दैट दिस इज एब्सेंट एंड दिस इज नीडेड। आपने ये ऐड कर दिया तो इसका आपको नंबर मिलेगा, तो अवेयरनेस का भी नंबर मिल जाएगा। डज दैट मेक सेंस?
और एक और चीज ध्रुव सर, जब काउंटर डिमेंशन हम लोग देते हैं ना, जैसे लेट से देयर इज अ क्वेश्चन, जो लास्ट क्वेश्चन आपने लिया था, तो
हाँ,
उसमें एक बार आप क्वेश्चन पे लेके जा सकते हो, या फिर आप क्वेश्चन एक बार बोलोगे तो आई कैन एग्जैक्टली से।
दिस क्वेश्चन राइट,
नहीं, ऊपर वाला क्वेश्चन इन विच वी हैड द काउंटर डिमेंशन जस्ट बिफोर दिस।
दिस वन।
राइट। हाँ। तो सीएजी इज द प्राइमरी कॉज ऑफ वाइड स्प्रेड पैरालाइजिंग अनविलिंगनेस। ठीक है, अगर इसका काउंटर डिमेंशन देना है तो जैसे काउंटर दो तरीके का हो सकता है, या तो ये कि इसके अलावा और क्या प्रॉब्लम्स है, या फिर ये जो स्टेटमेंट है उसका एग्जैक्ट ऑपोजिट, कि इट इज नॉट द प्राइमरी कॉज, समथिंग एल्स इज द प्राइमरी कॉज।
नहीं नहीं, इसमें
तो
यार इट इज ऑलवेज क्वेश्चन डिपेंडेंट। सो आई अंडरस्टैंड योर स्कूल ऑफ थॉट, बट आई एम व्हाट आई एम से इन सच अ क्वेश्चन, आप इसमें ये नहीं बोलोगे कि कैग इज द ओनली कॉज और देयर आर अदर कॉजेज और कैग इज नॉट द ओनली कॉज। इसमें आप ये
हम्म
बोलोगे दैट कैग इज स्टिल नेसेसरी because it's a constitutional body and you've read so much on CAG and you think it's a positive, so you will say that despite the problem that we have discussed of CAG, it is still necessary because, और
ओके
उसमें इस केस में सक्सेसेस एक्सप्लेन कर दिए थे, है ना?
ओके।
नहीं तो
तो
जो, हाँ हाँ,
हम्म।
जैसे ऊपर हमने फाइनेंशियल
तो
अकाउंटेबिलिटी की बात करी थी, तो वो आप बोल सकते हो इट्स अ मेन बुलवर्क ऑफ फाइनेंशियल अकाउंटेबिलिटी, दैट इज व्हाई इट इज नीडेड ओनली। तो आपने पूरी बुराई कर दी, नाउ यू एक्सप्लेन दैट यू नीडेड स्टिल, दैट्स द पॉइंट।
ओके, तो व्हाट आर अदर कॉजेज ऑफ वाइड स्प्रेड एंड पैरालाइजिंग अनविलिंगनेस, वी वोंट बी राइटिंग दैट हियर। ये जो
नो नो
कॉम्प्लीमेंट्री डिमेंशन होता है वो।
नो, बिकॉज वी नो अ लॉट ऑन कैग ऑलरेडी।
ओके
हम्म।
ओके, सो इट डिपेंड्स ऑन
अब
क्वेश्चन टू
ये तो
क्वेश्चन की।
जैसे जैसे मान लो,
हाँ
जैसे फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन था, मान लो अगर ये 20 मार्कर होता, तो
हाँ।
here you could have said that what are the other measures that I have to take out to revolutionize the accounting and budget planning process. It's not only computerization but other processes as well. समझ में आया?
हाँ।
वहां पे हमारे पास कैग एक पूरा एज अ बॉडी एज अ क्वेश्चन है, तो वहां पे हम ये बोलेंगे नहीं, कैग अभी भी जरूरी है। हम ये नहीं बोलेंगे कि अदर रीजंस ऑफ गवर्नमेंट इंस्टीट्यूशंस टू डिसाइड इन एनएक्ट के हैं।
सो
ऑल्सो,
बेसिकली थोड़ा सब्जेक्टिव है, लॉजिक के बेसिस पे एंड क्वेश्चन टू क्वेश्चन के बेसिस पे, व्हाटएवर सीम्स लॉजिकल वी हैव टू डिसाइड अकॉर्डिंगली, राइट?
यस, ऑल्सो हैव टू कीप इट पॉजिटिविस्ट। तो मतलब पॉजिटिविस्ट, ये पबैड वाला नहीं, पॉजिटिव रखना है बेसिकली,
हम्म।
कि पॉजिटिव टोन में देखा। तो ऊपर आप और सजेशंस दे रहे हो कि हम बेटर कैसे करेंगे, है ना? यहाँ पे आप मेरे को ये बताकर
हम्म
क्या करोगी और प्रॉब्लम्स क्या है, या तो आप सॉल्यूशंस दे दो। इन सॉल्यूशंस यू कैन से दैट दिस इज नॉट द ओनली सॉल्यूशन, द अदर सॉल्यूशंस इंक्लूड दिस,
हम्म
दैट इज ओके। ठीक है,
गॉट इट। ओके, थैंक यू सो मच।
डन। So I think with this we come to end of this unit. If you have any doubts as far as this unit is concerned, let me know. Otherwise, move on to the next one quickly. ठीक है, then we'll move on to the next one. It's a very simple unit, Unit 1, Paper 2, Evolution. Everybody has their own way of writing. We have just tried to pin it down. You can have your own ways. It's okay. थोड़ा जल्दी से we'll quickly discuss on it. It's very basic. Do Kautilya. It's almost asked every alternate year. And then if Kautilya is asked this year, then you'll have British or Mughal. Then again Kautilya next year, then British or Mughal. And this is how we'll go with it. Only three topics. It's very simple. First question is Kautilya's Arthashastra is a theoretical work on the state and statecraft. Comment. You have to talk about everything that you know about as far as Kautilya is concerned. Just link it with how it's related to state and statecraft. That's it. Introduction, brief about Arthashastra. Body in the thesis, and we'll talk about how Kautilya's Arthashastra is a theoretical work on the state and statecraft, and then conclusion. ठीक है, Kautilya, also known as Indian Machiavelli, has come up with Arthashastra, a treatise of social, political, economic, and administrative system in the modern administration. Or you can also say that Kautilya wrote a Shastra, the ancient Indian classic, which was written in 300 BC, first century AD, that offers deep insights into politics, statecraft, and issues of governance. Otherwise, you can also, so there's this scholar called as Subhash Kashyap, who has called it as a treasure trove of good governance. You can किसी भी एक स्टैंडर्ड इंट्रोडक्शन को फिक्स कर लीजिए फॉर कौटिल्य एंड जस्ट राइट इट डाउन, ठीक है? सो दिस आई फाइंड इट बेटर, ट्रेजर ट्रोव। एक बार अच्छे से पढ़ लेना क्या है, आई एम नॉट एबल टू रिकॉल, बट दिस इज हाउ इट इज, ठीक है? Once you've written your fixed introduction, which you've already decided back at home, you come down to the body. Say Shastra comprehensively deals with the science of governance. It has an interdisciplinary perspective and is hailed as a confluence of social sciences that it deals with most of the aspects of statecraft. No any other ancient texts can be compared with this work in terms of the scope, as well as impact, as well as the nature of subject it deals with. So, for example, you have politics, public administration, law, economic, society, IR. You also have ethics, right, etc. To ensure the idea of state is executed, Kautilya prescribes statecraft, which has pragmatic aspect of consisting of principles such as division of work, specialization, hierarchy, discipline, Saptang theory. You can also link it to how such principles are also laid down by classical thinkers, right? Second, good governance, the role and duty of the king, that the happiness of the king lies in the happiness of the people. You can use the maxim here. In his welfare lies his welfare, in their happiness is happiness, etc. This brings welfare orientation to the administration and governance. This has been described as the idea of Yogkshema. He also recognized king as a role model, Yatha Raja Tatha Praja, progressive taxation. Also, yes, this capital expenditure 75% versus 25%, curbing root corruption from the root, ethics in personal administration, etc. Also, whenever you want to, enunciate these pointers, so for example, you have the heavy capital expenditure. Tell us how this is relevant even today. So, for example, you can take an example from 2023 budget. कि आज के डेट में भी इतना परसेंट कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर नहीं है, बट कौटिल्य ने उसी टाइम पे बोला था कि इतना होना चाहिए. सो दिस हाउ यू लिंक इट टू कंटेम्पररी डेवलपमेंट्स एंड मेक योर आंसर अ बेटर आंसर. इज एज सिंपल एज दैट. ठीक है. एथिक्स इन पर्सनल एडमिशन ही सेज द क्वालिटी.
सर
हाँ जी.
ये जो पॉइंट आपने बोला है, ये इसी पर्टिकुलर पॉइंट के आंसर में लिखना है क्या कि दिस
हाँ हाँ,
विल
मतलब यार ये
चेंज
अब
द
ये जो
करंट काउंट?
कैसे ये लिखा हुआ है ये तो हर कोई लिख रहा है ना. You have to just make your answer a little better than the other. So
ओके
how do you make it better is you link it with today. You tell us that despite this was brought down in 300 BC. We are sitting in 2023, 2024 AD now, and we have still not implemented it. So this is how it still remains relevant. And this is what the art of statecraft was. ठीक है.
ओके सर सर हम ना जनरली तो अगर कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर या बजट का क्वेश्चन है तो उसमें इंटरलिंक करते हैं ना कौटिल्य को, क्योंकि वहां पे लिख दिया कि कौटिल्य ने तब बोला था. अब ये क्वेश्चन इज अबाउट कौटिल्य, तो उसमें भी ऐसे रिवर्स लिंकिंग भी करनी है क्या?
यार मतलब
मतलब जनरली वी
I
लिंक
personally,
थिंकर्स.
no, I personally do this only. But
अच्छा
Kautilya,
ओके.
why would you link budget with Kautilya? That's no
नहीं,
why.
नॉट बजट एज इन, आई एम जस्ट सेइंग कि कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर पे अगर क्वेश्चन आता है अज्यूमिंग, तो फिर अपन वहां पे लिख लेते हैं ना कि कौटिल्य आल्सो सेड अबाउट दिस, जैसे हम लोग नॉर्मली थिंकर्स को लिंक करते हैं कि कोई वर्ड आ गया तो उसको फिर बैक टू थिंकर्स से लिंक करो.
ठीक
मतलब
है.
ऐसे भी करना है क्या कि थिंकर पे क्वेश्चन आया तो फिर करंट से लिंक करो?
करना ही है मतलब wherever you
मतलब
can.
पेपर टू को पेपर वन से लिंक करना है और पेपर वन को भी एक्टिवली पेपर टू
करेक्ट.
से लिंक करना
करेक्ट. तो आप जो भी एग्जाम्पल लिखते हो दिस इज नथिंग. तो ये जो है ये एक तरीके से एग्जाम्पल ही हो गया ना.
है.
इंडियन एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन का एग्जाम्पल ही तो लिखते हो. तो मेजरली तो आप ये करते हो. एवरीबडी डज दिस. बट वी ट्राई टू से दैट ऑल्सो ट्राई टू लिंक थिंकर्स वेर एवर यू कैन. सो दिस इज सेकेंडरी बट दिस इज प्राइमरी ऑलवेज. ये तो यू हैव टू डू इट.
ओके.
दिस इज नथिंग बट एन एनुंसिएशन ऑफ दिस पॉइंट. राइट.
ठीक है, व्हाट योर पॉइंट.
Kautilya's Shastra sets very high standards for the state and administration, and this seminal work still acts as a guide to the state. ये बहुत ही basic था. You can include as many things as you want to, and then go ahead with it. ठीक है. I'll move on to the next question then. Mughal administrative system was centralized. Despotism comment again because it's you have to include everything. Please just try to link everything that was there with centralized despotism. So you had position and rank classification. You had dual functions of military and civilian in the same power. You had king who was a dictator. You had king enjoying the divine powers. All of this was nothing but centralized despotism. You can also talk about Kagaz Raj, police thana. All of this is although positive, but you can still call it as centralized despotism because law and order administration was maintained here. Here written communication was done, but everything was done by the people who had only two, मतलब military power भी जिसके पास थी उसी के पास civilian power थी, and only those people did the Kagaz Raj. So it again came down to being centrally despotic. Nothing but how every feature of Mughal administration should be linked to it being called as centralized despotic. That is it. तो द आर्ट हियर इज नॉट ओनली टॉकिंग अबाउट सेंट्रलाइज्ड बॉडीजम, अदरवाइज उसमें एक ही वर्ड आ पाएगा कि भाई वो सिविलियन फंक्शन और मिलिट्री फंक्शन एक ही में था. बट आपको हर फीचर लिखना है. लेट द एग्जामिनर नो दैट यू नो एवरीथिंग एंड जस्ट लिंक इट विद being centralized despotic. That is it. Introduction about Mughal administrative system, body thesis, statement, conclusion. The Mughal administrative system was military rule by nature and a form of centralized despotism. The Mughal administrative system is exemplary of the fact that as long as the emperor was strong, there was political stability. Mughal administration's main character was centralized administrative system based upon the Mansabdari system, which is considered as a bureaucratic system, civil and military type of mixed system. Mansabdari. This is the exact system I was talking about. It was centralized despotic because the emperor was the linchpin of the administration. He acted as a dictator. Here you can talk about अब उसको थोड़ा सा अगर better link करना तो you can say that only perform regulatory functions, which was maintenance of law and order and generation of revenue, versus developmental functions as on today, which need of developmental functions as on today. Second, little to no separation of powers. All LE and J powers were vested in the hands of emperor. The emperor was the supreme commander of the army. You can also talk about how religion was nothing but J. The judiciary was based out of religion. The emperor was the supreme commander of the army. Centralized bureaucracy, wherein the emperor appointed the mansabdars as well as the other officials to effectively run the empire. There is no mention of people's participation in administrative affairs. However, it cannot be called completely centralized because if you want to add this dimension, you can. But I don't think that there's any need to, but still, because the tone of the question is very negative and we always treat Mughal administration as negative, so you can continue with it. But if you still want to talk about the present relevance, so here you can talk about the present relevance कि भाई उसी के टाइम पे लोकल सेल गवर्नेंस स्टार्ट हुआ था, उसी के टाइम पे पुलिस थाना स्टार्ट हुए थे, तो आज की डेट में दे आर मेंटेनिंग द लॉ एंड ऑर्डर, दे आर द लिंचपिन्स ऑफ लॉ एंड ऑर्डर. You have district as the basic root, etc. So empire was divided into seven subas, sarkars, parganas, mansabdars and jagidars, certain degree of autonomy, council of ministers, the emperor in decision making. Conclusion: many aspects of Indian administration today may be traced back to the Mughal era, which is considered a watershed in the history of Indian administration. Because you have ended on a positive note, so you can. So present relevance जब हम पढ़ते हैं तो local self governance, ऐसी written communication can be linked to कागज राज. All of these positives can also be concluded with. Yes. ठीक है. Okay. Moving on to the next one then. Yes, the third question is red
पर
tape is a. हाँ जी.
10 मार्कर में फिर काउंटर के जनरली अवॉइड ही करना है ना, अगर
हाँ,
अपने पास में पॉइंट्स ऑलरेडी है तो.
यूजुअली हाँ पॉइंट्स हैं इसलिए आप अपना अवॉइड कर सकते
हाँ,
हैं. ठीक है. Red tapeism is a major obstacle to the implementation of good governance. Comment. Okay. Technically, good governance is also a part of Unit 1. So, okay, red tapeism is a major obstacle to the implementation of good government. Comments a very simple question. Let's go quickly into it. Good governance emphasizes to ensure maximum welfare for maximum people and to empower citizens, while red tapeism is the over conformity to rules and regulations that delays actions in the governance process. You just define what is red tapeism, what is good governance. You can include the principle of utilitarianism because you're talking about maximum welfare of maximum people. तो जहाँ पे भी keywords हम ला सकते हैं वो ले आए. Utilitarianism यहाँ पे बात कर सकते हैं. ठीक है. Body India inherited the administrative system of the British administration, which focused on rules and regulations, hierarchy, which is nothing but the negative features of the Iberian bureaucracy, and that is why you see red tapeism obstructing the good governance. So you've made the heading red tapeism obstructs good governance. Gave out 3-4 points. How? Because it hinders both efficiency as well as effectiveness. For example, under the license permit quota regime, which is the license quota permit Raj, projects were delayed and therefore economic growth could not go beyond 3 to 4%, which we also call as the Hindu rate of growth. ठीक है. Against the idea of responsiveness, for example, you have ease of doing business being the demand of the time, cannot afford red tapeism, you will not have FDIs or investments coming in, no public participation due to the erosion of citizens' trust in governance, red tapeism and transparency cannot coexist. For example, the taxation reforms into GST have ensured speedy functioning of returns by maintaining transparency through e-governance. Now, you need to understand good governance का जहाँ पे भी आया और जो भी concept पूछ रहा है, because they keep on changing and link it to good governance. Just look at the 8 pillars of good governance and link it with them. So if you look at it, we have done nothing but that only. So we've picked up 4 pillars: transparency, responsiveness, participation, and efficiency and effectiveness. ठीक है. उन 8 में से कोई भी 5-6 पिलर्स आप पकड़ो और उस कॉन्सेप्ट जो भी क्वेश्चन में पूछा गया उसको लिंक करके यू टेल अस हाउ इट्स एंटाई दिस एंड हाउ यू कैन मेक इट फॉर दोस कॉन्सेप्ट्स दैट यू हैव मेंशनड. Solution or way forward: decrease the number of hierarchies, change the performance evaluation system of bureaucracy from the outputs to outcomes. Here you can talk about again efficiency versus effectiveness, increase transparency, ensure accountability, etc. Conclusion: red tapeism is a consequence of what Merton calls as rule ritualism, and in turn results in goal displacement. To get rid of this, appropriate accountability mechanisms must be established in letter and spirit. See, if you include certain keywords, you get a extra mark in your conclusion. So this is why we have done this. You can take note of this. Red tapeism is a consequence of what Merton calls as rule ritualism, and it turns result in goal displacement. ठीक है, ओके, fair enough. Any doubts with this question? Otherwise, I'll quickly move on to the next one.
सर आपने वो ऊपर वाला क्वेश्चन है ना उसमें कंक्लूड इंट्रोडक्शन में बोला था कि सम यू यू मेंशन सम कीवर्ड, तो हाँ, सो माय क्वेश्चन इज बेसिकली कीवर्ड्स जनरली हम लोग कंक्लूजन में यूज करना चाहिए ना?
ये दोनों में यूज करना चाहिए, मतलब कीवर्ड का मतलब इंट्रोडक्शन में द कीवर्ड शुड बी फीचर बेस्ड। ठीक है, कि अगर आप मुगल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन की बात करो तो कोई फीचर्स, एग्जाम्पल मनसबदारी सिस्टम विच इज अ मिक्स टाइप ऑफ ब्यूरोक्रेसी, मिलिट्री एंड सिविलियन, कैन बी अ कीवर्ड फॉर इंट्रोडक्शन। कंक्लूजन में जो कीवर्ड होना चाहिए वो जैसे या तो इंडियन एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन से कोई कीवर्ड हो गया या उसका कोई एग्जाम्पल हो गया, ऐसा होना चाहिए।
जैसे आरटीआई मास्टर की टू गुड गवर्नेंस सेकंड ईआरसी ने बोला है, तो
हाँ।
दिस कुड बी अ बेटर कंक्लूजन राइट इन कंपैरिजन टू इंट्रोडक्शन।
यस।
ओके।
ठीक है। Both Kautilya envisages protection, welfare, and prosperity of the state and its people as the utmost concern of a ruler. In this context, discuss the significance of Kautilya's emphasis on governing, accountability, and justice in contemporary India. 20 marker question. Try to make the three headings as separate because it's 20 marker and then address them. So, Kautilya envisages protection, welfare, as well as prosperity of the state and its people as the most concern of a ruler. Discuss the significance of Kautilya's emphasis on governing, accountability, and justice. Arthashastra of Kautilya deals with the science of governance and principles of administration, which is immense relevance for contemporary Indian public administration. Protection, welfare, and prosperity of state and people is the ruler's utmost priority as per Kautilya because it provides stability of governance and furthers the state interests. Also, please try to write the maxim here because it suits perfectly. In the happiness of his subjects lies his happiness, in their welfare is welfare. Anything that is going against the interest shall be treated as not good. वो जो maxim है पूरी लिख दो because it's a 20 marker, you can afford to write it, and it also directly answers the question that is being there. Body. Kautilya's Arthashastra not only is a book of politics and administration, but also it's a book on science of livelihood. It is a book which deals with almost all the facets of statecraft, hence considered as the confluence of social sciences. Arthashastra is both descriptive as well as prescriptive in its orientation. Please make sure that you can, have a look at such keywords. You can use it in any question of Arthashastra. ठीक है, okay. Thesis statement: the Arthashastra gives practical solutions for governance with emphasis on rule of law, Palan, Yog Shema, Saptang principles, etc. The role and duty of the king, that the happiness of the king lies in the happiness of the people. This brings welfare orientation to the administration and governance, as has been described in the idea of Yog Shema. The Saptang principles deal with strong state, and when India's territorial and economic security is challenged, this principle can offer insights. Now, what are the relevance of his ideas today? As far as the governance or governing is concerned, Kautilya prescribes a welfare state wherein the happiness of subjects lies the king's happiness. This forms the basis of citizen-centric governance even today. And now you start linking today's examples. For example, you have provided universal healthcare coverage under Ayushman Bharat, you have universal education coverage under the RTE, you have whatever better initiatives as far as citizen centricity is concerned, mention a couple of them. Second, accountability, because that was the second part of the question. Kautilya describes over 40 different ways of corruption, which is also a problem dealt by contemporary India, leading to the policy paralysis. He prescribes accountability based on principles like division of work, unity of command, code of conduct, hierarchy, discipline, etc. These are even significant in contemporary India because it increases responsiveness, it creates moral responsibility as well as legal accountability for officials. It leads to an effective resource management. So, for example, the 360-degree appraisal mechanism, civil services, rule of conduct, etc. Do you see, even though it's not as relevant as the accountability is concerned, but just because we wanted to include a lot of dimensions, so we have said that accountability can be ensured because the principles such as division of work has been talked about, unity of command. So the priority should be to include more features. हालांकि डायरेक्टली रिलेटेड नहीं है, बट कोई भी इसको गलत नहीं बोल सकता, है ना? ठीक है। Third, justice. Due to the divinity element attached to the king, Kautilya envisages the king's justice to be the ultimate justice. The idea has little significance today. However, the idea of just system ensures citizens' welfare. His idea of government taking the responsibility of women, children, districts, etc., is also significant in terms of affirmative action in contemporary India. Also, so this is nothing but equity leading to social justice. You can also talk about the Samdam Dand Ved for justice as far as the corruption part was concerned. ठीक है। ऑल्सो सोशल जस्टिस के अंडर आप प्रोग्रेसिव टैक्सेशन वगैरह की भी बात कर सकते हो। that you talked about progressive taxation, which will again lead to social justice. You can talk about revenue expenditure versus capital expenditure, which will again lead to social justice. You can talk about how he said that the assets of king should be different from the assets of state. That the resources of state should not belong to the king. ये भी उसने बोला था ना, separation of assets. So this is nothing but economic justice to the citizens. Right? Justice के आप अलग अलग dimensions को open करके you can talk about it, because you don't have enough points on justice, but you have enough points on governance, you have enough points on accountability. So justice को आप open करके लिख सकते हो. This being said, conclusion, however, it must be realized that Arthashastra is a centuries old treatise, and in the current democratic administrative setup, the ideas must be taken with the Wilsonian perspective in mind, which says that borrow the skills to sharpen the knife and not the intention to murder. Again, grafting is better than transplantation. We've already discussed it a lot of times. उसका एक और alternative, which says, which is a Wilsonian perspective, it says that borrow the skills to sharpen the knife and not the intention to murder. Yes,
सर
हाँ जी.
सर ये नंबर ऑफ पॉइंट्स थोड़े कम नहीं दिखेंगे एग्जामिनर को? वी आर जस्ट राइटिंग 3 पॉइंट्स, तो इसको
No,
इसी
no,
तरीके से लिखना चाहिए
these have to be the headings. ये points ऐसे लिख दिया है. These have to be the headings. So relevance of ideas
हम्म
today आपने लिखा पहला governance. मतलब ये तीन आप point बना सकते हो. इसके अंदर ऐसे लिखना है. Because the question is only this ना, it's a 10 marker or it's a 20 marker. ठीक है, तो बड़ा करना पड़ेगा. तो आप points के अंदर सब points लिखने पड़ेंगे. So when you talk about governance as the first main point, ऐसे governance लिखा तो 1 2 3 governance के अंदर तीन चार point लिखने पड़ेंगे. Second accountability, फिर 1 2 3 4. Third justice, फिर 1 2 3 4.
हम्म
ठीक है. दिस इज व्हाई आई आल्सो गिव यू मोर पॉइंट्स हियर इन जस्टिस, कि क्यों कम रहेंगे. ओके, डन. डन. एनी डाउट्स विद दिस यूनिट?
और सर जो अभी आपने बताया ना कि कभी कभी क्या होता है ना, वो क्वेश्चन 15 मार्कर होता है, 20 मार्कर होता है, बट जो स्टेटमेंट है ना उसके
आई
बारे
एम
में हमें ज्यादा
रियली सॉरी, आपकी
इन्फॉर्मेशन।
आवाज बहुत कट रही. आपकी आवाज बहुत कट रही है. हैव टू रिपीट.
हेलो, एम आई ऑडिबल सर नाउ बेटर?
हाँ जी, हाँ जी.
मैं ये चीज पूछ रहा था कि जब जब जो क्वेश्चन की डिमांड होती है ना, उससे रिलेटेड हमारे पास में काफी कम पॉइंट्स होते हैं, क्वेश्चन इज 15 मार्कर, 20 मार्कर। तो शायद आपने अभी इससे रिलेटेड कुछ बात करी या फिर न्यू
यार
प्रॉब्लम के
आपकी आवाज
सोल्यूशन
फिर
को।
चली गई. आपने बोला 15 मार्कर 20 मार्कर होता है, तो उसके रिलेटेड पॉइंट्स बहुत कम होते हैं. ठीक है, आगे.
हाँ, सीधा जो डिमांड ऑफ द क्वेश्चन है ना उससे रिलेटेड पॉइंट्स कम होते हैं, तो ऐसे सिचुएशन में क्या करना चाहिए?
वही मैंने आपको बताया, पहले दो पॉइंट उस डिमांड से रिलेटेड होने चाहिए, और इवन इफ यू नो द डिमांड तो मतलब, बट द थर्ड एंड फोर्थ पॉइंट माइट गेट रिपीटेड इन टर्म्स ऑफ वॉट एवर यू रिटर्न फॉर द फर्स्ट टू, सो जस्ट ट्राई टू लिंक इट विद अदर यूनिट्स. This is the basic premise. हमने answer writing session में भी I've taken this only, that even if you know a lot of content, just make sure that you're writing the first 3 4 points which is specific. The other have to be interlinked somehow. तो वो अगर नहीं
ओके।
आता तो ऑटोमेटिकली करना ही पड़ेगा, and that is how you can better on the answer.
हम्म।
ठीक है. मतलब आप बाकी यूनिट से लिंक करने की कोशिश करो.
ओके।
यस. ठीक है. Any doubts with this particular unit? Otherwise move on to the next unit, which is PSUs. Only has 3 or 4 questions. ठीक है. Okay. PSUs then. Okay, the question for this year was, India has significantly advanced in its development goals, increased efficiency in the public sector, and unlocked innovation in the private sector by adopting the approach of digital public infrastructure. Elucidate. Basic premise of the question is around DPI, which is the digital public infrastructure in India. We are saying that it has done threefold objectives, which has advanced in first developmental goals. So we have moved towards development because of DPI. Second, we have increased efficiency in the public sector. So we are just talking about increased efficiency because of DPI. And the third we are saying is we have unlocked innovation in the private sector. We are talking innovation. Now, this can be both in public as well as private. The question is private, but you have to talk about both. This can also be both in public and private, but the question is, although the question is public, you have to talk about overall innovation as well, overall efficiency as well. So, increase efficiency, in better innovation, and developmental goals. These three headings have to be linked to DPI. So, the overall structure would be that we start with what is DPI, the Digital Public Infrastructure in India. That will tell you the features of DPI. or the examples or whatever the recent developments around DPI is, then we'll link the DPI with these 3 points. So first, second, and third, how DPI has led to development, how DPI has led to increased efficiency, and how DPI has led to better innovation. And then we can, because it's a 20 marker, we can also talk about challenges around DPI, and then we come out with solutions, way forward, or conclusion. Yes, this would be the format for this question because it's a very different question. So I think it would have been better to explain you the structure. DPI, which is the digital public infrastructure, refers to blocks or platforms such as digital identification, payment infrastructure, data exchange solutions that help countries deliver essential services to their people. Now you have to link DPI with public administration, right? So the overall essence of public administration is what? Help countries deliver essential services to the people, empowering citizens and improving lives by enabling digital inclusion. ये आपने टेक्निकल एस्पेक्ट एक्सप्लेन किया और यहाँ पे उसको लिंक कर दिया वेलफेयर एस्पेक्ट से. सो डीपीआई refers to blocks or platforms such as digital identification, payment infrastructure, and data exchange solutions. This is the technical aspect to it. Link it with the welfare aspect, which will now help in countries delivering essential services to the people, empowering the citizens, and improving lives by enabling digital inclusion. Okay, this is how you can make up the definition for or the introduction for this. For any concept which you do not know or is recent, just try to link it. So the next year the question might come on AI, right? So just try to link what AI is. So generic definition of GS3 you give, but link it with PubAd in terms of what it will help to do. So it will help to deliver essential services. It will help in empowerment of the citizens. It will help in improving lives by digital inclusion. Okay, body, tell us what the features of the DPI is. So three pillars of DPI. DPI has three broad objectives: आइडेंटिटी, पेमेंट्स एंड डेटा मैनेजमेंट्स. ठीक है, अब ये तीन इनके ऑब्जेक्टिव हैं कि हम आइडेंटिटी, पेमेंट एंड डेटा मैनेजमेंट. इंडिया, through its India Stack platform, we have given the example of the overall digital public infrastructure that we have in India, which is the India Stack platform, has become the first country to develop all three foundational pillars of DPI. पहला पिलर क्या था? आइडेंटिटी. ऑब्जेक्टिव क्या होना चाहिए? आइडेंटिटी. इसमें डीपीआई का पिलर क्या है? डिजिटल आईडी सिस्टम. इंडिया में क्या है? ये आधार के नाम से जाना जाता है. ठीक है. सेकंड डीपीआई ऑब्जेक्टिव इज डिजिटल पेमेंट्स. उसका पिलर क्या है? रियल टाइम फास्ट पेमेंट सिस्टम. इंडिया हैज यूपीआई बाय एनपीसीआई. Third pillar of or the objective of digital public infrastructure is data management. The associated DPI pillar would be consent-based data sharing system. In India, we have the data empowerment protection architecture because you need consent for data sharing. So we have data empowerment protection architecture. You can also talk about data protection bills. You can also talk about committees. If I'm not wrong, Shri Krishna committee. I am not able to recall the name, but whatever the committee's name was. Okay. So with this, you will let the examiner know in detail that you directly know what DPI is. Okay. Also, please learn this. This was important. That is why we have included here, because this year DPI was important. So identity, payment, and data management. Identity in India, we have Aadhaar, which through the digital ID system. Payment, we have UPI because we need real-time fast payment system. Data management, we have DAPA because we need consent-based data sharing system. Now we'll be linking the 3 points, which is first DPI and developmental goals. Second would be DPI and efficiency. And third would be DPI and innovation. Okay, then we have talked about the challenges around DPI, and then we'll move forward in conclusion. As simple as that. Okay. Yes, the first one was DPI and developmental goals. How does DPI lead to developmental achieving the development goals? First and foremost, it addresses the huge digital divide. According to the NFHS report, only 57.1% of the male population and 33% of the female population have ever used the internet. DPI in India has helped to create a digital ecosystem that is accessible, efficient, transparent, and empowered citizens to participate in the digital economy, thereby leading to digital inclusion. Okay, this is the first point, addressing the digital divide, moving towards development. Second, social security cover to vulnerable sections. DPI has allowed to the government to extend social security coverage of the vulnerable sections. For example, according to the World Bank's group's G2P report, G2P initiative report, linkage of a financial account with an ID or phone number helped the government to roll out cash assistance more quickly during the COVID-19. Nothing but DBT. Okay, so social security cover is extended because of DBT. Third, digital financial inclusion. Digital public infrastructure has helped to expand financial access to unbanked populations in India. For example, the use of mobile wallets and digital payment platforms. Fourth, accessibility. whenever you talk about digital aspects, we talk about a lot of A's, right? Accessibility, availability, affordability. So you can also include all those points here if you run out of points. Okay? Increase in access. DPI has helped to improve access to services of people living in remote areas. For example, digital learning platforms have helped students in rural areas with access to quality education, especially during COVID. Digitalization of the government services can improve health and education outcomes. The provision of e-government services, along with high quality telecommunication infrastructure, is the efficiency in health spending, which translates to higher life expectancy and lower infant mortality. You can also talk about with the coming in of many players, affordability is now there. So, for example, that since Geo came, you have less rates of internet usage and being charged. Right. Seventh, you can say because of digitalization, you have better availability of services. This is nothing but all this. The fifth point is availability, right? So you can enunciate on these points. Second, talk about how DPI will ensure efficiency. First and foremost, you have increased transparency. Therefore, efficiency has to be taken care of. Otherwise, people will oppose it. Second, because of DPI, you have reduced leakages and corruption. To prevent leakages, the government introduced the DBT scheme in 2013 for transferring benefits of various government schemes directly to bank accounts. Utilizing Aadhaar features is one key component here. Try to mention Jam Trinity. Better targeting of beneficiary, because the problems of over exclusion and under exclusion are done away with. You can also say that you have better efficiency because with digitalization, everything becomes computerized. And if you incorporate present techniques such as AI and predictive analytics, you can do better in terms of providing service delivery. Therefore, efficiency increases. Okay. So for better targeting of beneficiary by leveraging on DPI initiatives, the PFMS, the Public Financial Management System, was able to seamlessly transfer funds to nearly 500 million beneficiaries during the COVID-19 outbreak, enhancing cash transfer programs, budget execution, responsiveness, and efficiency. Third pointer was DPI and innovation. DPI allows for innovative and convenient public and private services, help overcome inclusion or accessibility barriers, and increase transparency and accountability with real-time data. There have been multiple examples of successful private businesses that could only be possible due to the India stack. Now, because the question was specific and private, here, if you have a look, you talk about public as well as private. Specifically private, there have been multiple examples of successful private businesses that could only be possible due to the India stack. In India, the digital only zero commission stockbrokers, Zerodha, Upstocks are the largest two stockbrokers by the market share, which belong to the private sector. As the number of DPI increases, the possibility for innovative applications grows exponentially by combining new services in a different way. With the availability of combining e-sign, e-KYC, DigiLocker, UPI, new insurance companies in India can open accounts, enter contracts, disburse collect money, and issue insurance policies directly into citizens' lockers without any physical interaction with the customer, nothing but innovation. Okay. Challenges and way forward. Challenges around data privacy, data protection, digital device, low digital literacy, exclusion errors. It is important to address limits of the system to help prevent the exclusion of genuine beneficiaries. Way forward and conclude. So you know that because of digitalization, if you do not have a particular document, although you might be a particular a needed beneficiary, will not be done so because of digitalization. This is one problem, exclusion and errors. You have low digital literacy, you have a digital divide, you have data protection problems, data privacy problems, etc. Way forward in conclusion, development of a robust cybersecurity framework. If you have a look at it, this is what I was saying. So around data, you have a lot of problems and solutions. We have not uh, talked about matlab, what do you call it? Cyber attacks. But still, the first solution that we have done is cybersecurity because we know that cybersecurity is very important. So because we could not include in the challenges in the first solution, we have given a cybersecurity framework. Second, improved internet connectivity, digital literacy, enhanced collaboration between countries, regulatory regime to avoid monopolization and digital colonization. Please make sure that you have a look at this keyword, which is digital colonization, which is again a negative of digitalization. Overall, the growth and development of India's DPI ecosystem in the past decade have been impressive, and there are significant opportunities for further growth and development in the coming years. As India continues on its path towards digital transformation, the development of a robust DPI ecosystem will be crucial for enabling inclusive and sustainable growth. Also, try to link it to the administration. So you know that Mission Karmyogi. In the conclusion, try to do that whenever possible. So Mission Karmyogi is also based on the concept of digitalization. So you can mention that. Okay. I got digital platform जो है वो. Did we all understand how to address this question?
Sir,
हाँ जी.
सर ये जो मिशन कर्मयोगी या आईगॉट का एग्जांपल आपने बोला है वो हम बॉडी में यूज करना ज्यादा प्रेफरेबल रहेगा या कंक्लूजन में, क्योंकि कोई पॉइंट डीपीआई हैज बीन यूज्ड इन आईगॉट या मिशन कर्मयोगी, तो दिस वी वुड बी
फिर
राइटिंग
बॉडी में
बॉडी और
एक्चुअली हैव अ लॉट ऑफ स्कोप, तो मिशन कर्मयोगी इज नथिंग बट इनोवेशन, है ना? तो इनोवेशन में वी ट्राई प्राइमरली हैड टू टॉक अबाउट द प्राइवेट सेक्टर, सो वी आई हैव इंक्लूडेड हियर आल्सो। आई एम सेइंग कि ओवरऑल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन जहाँ पे भी आप मिस कर देते हो ना, जैसे इस क्वेश्चन में नॉट टॉक्ड एनीवेयर अबाउट एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन बिकॉज द क्वेश्चन, अगर सेम क्वेश्चन जीएस 3 में आ सकता था तो कुछ फर्क थोड़ी होता उसमें। है तो बेसिकली जीएस 3 का ही क्वेश्चन। अब उसको पब एड ओरिएंटेड बनाने के लिए हमने लास्ट में एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन इंक्लूड कर दिया, इज ऑल आई एम ट्राइंग टू से। बॉडी में भी इंक्लूड कर सकते हो, नो इश्यूज, दैट्स आल्सो ओके। If you just have a look at this question, you can say that this is also a GS3 question, है ना, or a GS2 question. अब एट
एग्जैक्टली।
रिलेवेंट मैंने लास्ट में कंक्लूजन में ये बोल दिया, अदरवाइज यू कैन इंक्लूड इट इन द बॉडी आल्सो, देयर इज नो हार्ड एंड फास्ट रूल लाइक।
सर सब हेडिंग्स बनानी चाहिए क्या?
आपकी आवाज नहीं।
सब हेडिंग्स बनाने चाहिए क्या सर?
बिल्कुल सब हेडिंग्स मतलब इस
सब
क्वेश्चन।
हेडिंग्स एज इन वो पॉइंट वाले, हाँ, आप थोड़ा ऊपर ले सकते हो पेज को।
हाँ
और ऊपर मतलब बेसिकली सब हेडिंग्स ऊपर और थोड़ा, हाँ दिस इज अब रिड्यूस करप्शन एंड लीकेजेस लेट्स से।
हाँ
तो एंड इन द पॉइंट वी एक्सप्लेन द सेम थिंग कि हाँ डीपीआई से करप्शन एंड लीकेजेस कम होते हैं, तो
यस।
सब हेडिंग से कुछ वैल्यू एडिशन अगर नहीं हो रहा है एंड वी आर जस्ट रिपीटिंग दैट सब हेडिंग एंड एक्सप्लेनिंग दैट सब
हाँ तो
हेडिंग
नहीं
इन
करना
द
तो ये देखो, अब ट्रांसपेरेंसी में हमने नहीं बनाई ना, हमने बस पहला पॉइंट लिखा इंक्रीज ट्रांसपेरेंसी, सेकंड पॉइंट लिखा रिड्यूस लीकेजेस एंड करप्शन। अब इसके आगे बस एक एग्जांपल लिख दो, एग्जांपल डीबीटी सिंस 2013। ठीक है, थर्ड बेटर टारगेटिंग, फॉर एग्जांपल 500 million beneficiaries are targeted। But just give me a second, I'm getting a call, एक second। Yes. Okay. Any other doubt with this question? Otherwise, move on to the next one then.
सर तो सब हेडिंग हम डालते कहाँ हैं? बिकॉज जनरली टेंड्स टू हैपन कि वो सब हेडिंग को ही हम एक्सप्लेन करते हैं, या डालने भी चाहिए कि नहीं? आई एम नॉट टॉकिंग अबाउट ये डीपीआई एंड एफिशिएंसी वाला, ये बेटर
Well,
टारगेटिंग और
always
बेनिफिशियल।
always depends on the question. So let us talk about, let's say the question is on good governance. ठीक है,
हम्म।
अभी ऊपर ही तो करा है ना हमने एक ऐसा क्वेश्चन जहाँ पे हमने गुड गवर्नेंस से लिंक किया था। यार कहाँ गया? We just did one question, चलो I am
राइट।
not, so I'm just saying,
हाँ।
so let us assume that you have a question on good governance, so the heading would be pillars of good governance।
हम्म।
ठीक है, और ये 10 मार्कर है। अब इसमें पहला पॉइंट आप ये लिखकर बोल दो ट्रांसपेरेंसी, दूसरा लिख दो अकाउंटेबिलिटी, तीसरा छोड़ दो पार्टिसिपेशन, खत्म, ये तो नहीं कर सकते। तो इसमें सब
राइट।
हेडिंग करनी जरूरी है ना। ट्रांसपेरेंसी विल बी द फर्स्ट सब हेडिंग, नाउ यू एक्सप्लेन। अकाउंटेबिलिटी द सेकंड सब हेडिंग, नाउ यू एक्सप्लेन पूरा। थर्ड विल बी द पार्टिसिपेशन विद द सब हेडिंग, नाउ यू एक्सप्लेन पूरा। डज दैट मेक सेंस टू यू?
Let's say the question is how does ICT help in good governance, right? So the first point you would be writing promoting transparency, and in the explanation you would be writing ICT helps in promotion of transparency by this. So won't that be the explanation of what is given in the subheading itself? Like वो words क्यों हम waste कर रहे हैं? I'm asking this.
नहीं बट आप ट्रांसपेरेंसी में एग्जांपल्स दोगे ना तो आपको सब हेडिंग बनानी जरूरी होगी, बिकॉज यू डोंट हैव एनी अदर। यार अब जैसे इसमें तो सब हेडिंग बनानी ही नहीं है बिकॉज यू ऑलरेडी मेड 5 हेडिंग्स, so you don't
Right.
need a specific subheading, but in this question there will be no heading apart from ICT and good governance, right? So you would
हम्म।
need subheadings, even if you want to repeat, I don't think that you would have to repeat, but आपने ऐसे ट्रांसपेरेंसी लिखा तो अब आप लिखो that the digitalization ensures transparency because, how is it a repetition? आप अगर ये लिखोगे डिजिटलाइजेशन इंक्रीजेस ट्रांसपेरेंसी फुल स्टॉप, और आपने पहला लिखा एनहांस ट्रांसपेरेंसी, फिर लिख रहे हो डिजिटलाइजेशन इंक्रीजेस ट्रांसपेरेंसी फुल स्टॉप, दैट्स वेस्ट एंड नोबडी विल राइट दैट एंड यू शुड नॉट राइट
हम्म।
दैट। But if you write increases transparency, then you tell us how, and then you give
Right.
out a couple of example, then that's fine.
Exactly. Got your point.
ठीक है, नेक्स्ट। The new economic reforms during the past 3 decades have not only reduced the scope of industrial licensing and areas reserved exclusively for public sector, but also infringed the autonomy of the existing public sector undertakings. Examine. I'll repeat the questions. So the new economic reforms during the past 3 decades, past 3 decades का मतलब कहाँ से 1980s to 2010s, नहीं 2020 तो 1990s से, right? So 2020s. Okay, from 1990 onwards, so basically the new economic reforms during the past 3 decades, 1990 से ही आए थे, have not only reduced the scope of industrial licensing and areas reserved exclusively for public sector, but also infringed the autonomy of the existing public sector undertakings. Basically, overall LPG and the other economic reforms have basically opened up, so public sector का role has reduced. That's first. Second, we are also talking about the autonomy being infringed. ठीक है, अब इसको एग्जामिन करना है, 20 मार्कर है, ट्राई टू इंक्लूड एनपीएम एज वेल। ऑटोनॉमी की बात कर रहे हैं, पब्लिक सेक्टर की बात कर रहे हैं, बट ठीक है, जितना हम कर सकते हैं करेंगे। इकोनॉमिक रिफॉर्म्स की एक्सप्लेन, वील टॉक अबाउट द बेसिक्स अराउंड पीएसयूज, वील ट्राई टू एक्सप्लेन व्हाट द इकोनॉमिक रिफॉर्म्स आर, विल टेल हाउ इट हैज रिड्यूस्ड द स्कोप, देन वी आल्सो टॉक अबाउट हाउ इट हैज इन्फ्रिंज्ड द ऑटोनॉमी। एग्जामिन में अब ये सारे तो नेगेटिव ही हो गए, reducing the scope is a negative, infringing the autonomy is a negative. We'll also try to examine some positives और conclusion, और इन नेगेटिव को काउंटर करने का जो वे फॉरवर्ड होगा वो करके कंक्लूजन कर देंगे। ठीक है। Introduction. Public sector undertakings were expected to take India to a new stage of socio-economic transformation and fulfill welfare objectives as enshrined in the DPSPs. Body PSUs are expected to take lead role as private sector was not in a position to take the lead role. Therefore, we had introduced PSUs. There was concern for nation building, uniform development, etc. For example, many PSUs, or you can also call it a balanced regional development, inclusive development, nation building. For example, many PSUs were set up in Bimaru states for balanced regional development. They contributed in import substitution, self-reliance, self-sufficiency. It contributed in welfare through growth, development, and poverty reduction. Nothing but display of keywords around PSUs and its significance. So import substitution, self-reliance, self-sufficiency. I'll just highlight it for you. Okay. Okay. How have the new economic reforms reduced the scope of industrial licensing in areas reserved exclusively for the public sector? इतनी बड़ी heading नहीं बनानी, तो new economic reforms reduce the scope of public sector. That's it. The new economic reforms initiated in the 1990s aimed at liberalizing the Indian economy by reducing government intervention in the functioning of industries and promoting private sector participation. The main elements of the reforms included deregulation of industries, liberalization of foreign investment, disinvestment of PSUs, and reduction in trade barriers. These measures have not only reduced the scope of industrial licensing and areas reserved exclusively for the public sector, but also infringed the autonomy of existing public sector undertakings. Prior to the economic reforms, Indian industries are heavily regulated, and a large number of industries required licenses for the establishment of operation. The reforms led to the abolition of the industrial licensing system for most industries, except for a few strategic sectors such as defense, nuclear power, and hazardous chemicals. This change allowed the private sector to enter industries that were previously the domain of the public sector, thus increasing competition and reducing the monopoly of PSUs. For example, in the pre-reform era, the telecommunication sector was dominated by state-owned companies such as BSNL, MTNL. However, with the post-LPG, private sector players like Airtel, Vodafone, and Reliance entered into the market, leading to increased competition and better services to customers. You can talk about NPM benefits as well here. Reduction in areas reserved for the public sector. Before the economic reforms, the government reserved several industries exclusive for the public sector, such as coal mining, steel production, power generation. The new economic policy allowed private sector participation in these industries, leading to increased competition and reduced dominance of PSUs. For example, the government allowed private sector participation in coal mining and power generation, leading to the appearance of companies like Tata Power, Adani Power, which now compete with public sector giants like NTPC as well as Coal India. This is direct addressing the question. Second, infringement of autonomy of existing PSUs. The economic reforms also led to the government gradually reducing its control over the functioning of PSUs. This was done by disinvesting a part of government equity in these companies and making them more accountable. While this has improved the efficiency and competitiveness, it has also led to the infringement of their autonomy. Either apna, wo other reforms also, disinvestment. Then you had other reforms around PSUs, right? Memorandum, etc., perish or perform, ये सब था, वो सब आप pointers में mention करके conclude कर सकते हो. Example, the disinvestment process in companies like ONGC, GAIL, BPCL has resulted in these companies being more accountable to market forces and private shareholders, reducing the autonomy that they enjoyed as government-controlled entities. Just not, we don't have to, explain it in such paragraphs. Pointers में infringement of autonomy में ये जितने भी reforms थे बात कर देना. इधर overall reforms की liberalization, privatization की वजह से थोड़े बहुत example देके कर देना. And then overall we have explained what the new economic reforms were. ठीक है. This is basically the structure. Then examine में थोड़ा बहुत हम politics की भी बात करेंगे. So since 1990s onwards, from time to time, we have brought some reforms in PSU management like MOU, Ratna categorization, corporatization, etc. But these reforms have come in a piecemeal manner and in an ad hoc manner, like in 1987 MOU, 1995 categorization, etc. We do not have a policy strategy on how we will the PSUs in the new environment. The PSU's policy related to their human resource investment objectives have not been focused. Meanwhile, they have faced problems like sickness, lack of autonomy, etc. Even when we try to give them autonomy, but they still are the subject of over governance problems like CAG control, CVC control, CBI control, and then the three C's are also, and then parliamentary committees. The focus should be on to address the structural challenges faced by PSUs in India, rather than only focusing on disinvestment. PSUs are the vehicles of social justice, development, and nation security. ये बहुत सारा academic book type theory बन गई है, but I've already told you the overall structure. उसके points में लिखना है. और यहाँ पे conclusion जैसे जैसे we are moving towards the conclusion, to move towards the positive note of PSU. So they are vehicles of social justice, development, national security. Hence, they require both autonomy as well as they should be accountable. So the problem of two is autonomy and accountability को हमने यहाँ पे last में address कर दिया to the democratic institutions, but the current level accountability system restricts the competency and decision making flexibility. So how accountability is becoming a problem to the autonomy. Although reforms have been made, but the fundamental issues have been largely ignored. Hence, we need to develop a proper framework policy to address these problems of the PSUs. The Rungta panel recommendations, such as creating a holding company model, restructuring the MOU system, can be adopted. Similarly, the Niti Aayog needs to focus on addressing these structural issues instead of only focusing on privatization. तो आपने ओवरऑल इशू ऑफ डिसइन्वेस्टमेंट को काउंटर करके ओवरऑल कंक्लूजन बता दिया, उसका पॉजिटिव्स बता दिया, एंड उससे पहले जो क्वेश्चन पूछ रहा था वो बता दिया. So we have explained what introduction about PSUs. Then we have told what new economic reforms are. Also, please write it down in form points. Otherwise, there'll be a problem. Unlike the answer that we have just shown you, new economic reforms link it to how it has led to the decreased role of public sector. Tell us how it has infringed the autonomy. Next, positives of PSUs or solutions around autonomy and accountability, and then conclusion. This was the overall structure. Okay. Yes, did we understand this question? I think it was a little bit confusing, but the structure से समझ में आ गया वो. हाँ जी.
So can I also explain that? Can I also mention that we witnessed the rolling back of state
Yes, that was a part
after
of, yes,
1990s.
in the economic reforms. You can mention that. Wherever you are
Yes.
explaining the new economic reforms, you can mention that. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Done. Okay. Last question. The government policy of large-scale privatization of the key sectors of the economy may affect India's economic health. Comment. 10 marker may affect. So you have to tell that yes, it will, no, it won't, and then what would the balance and conclude. Okay. Government policy of large-scale privatization of the key sectors of economy may affect India's economic health. Comment. The government of India has been following the policy of disinvestment and privatization for bringing efficiency and improving the service delivery efficiency of the PSU since 1960s. Basically, in the introduction, we're answering the why part of the question. Why are we doing large-scale privatization? So the government claims to bring in efficiency and improving the service delivery efficiency. You can also here include the NPG or the NPM models, which says that the role coming in or the rolling back of the state will also lead to efficiency. Okay. Body policy of large-scale privatization. अब हम वो पहले पॉलिसी एक्सप्लेन करेंगे, उसको एनंसिएट करेंगे, फिर मे अफेक्ट इंडियाज हेल्थ के बारे में बात करेंगे, एंड देन विल कंक्लूड. ठीक है. ओके. गवर्नमेंट गोज फॉर स्ट्रेटेजिक सेल इन ऑर्डर टू ब्रिंग मैनेजरियल एफिशिएंसी, technology of private sector, and turnaround of loss-making PSUs. This investment can also bring corpus in hands of government, which can be used for basic infrastructure and social sector investments like education, health, etc. Government tries to minimize its fiscal burden through mopping of resources by disinvestment. Niti Aayog, 14th Finance Commission, etc. supported for strategic sale. The term disinvestment was used for the first time in interim budget 1991. However, the policy on disinvestment gathered steam around the government of PM Vajpayee when a new department of disinvestment was created in 1999. All of this is not necessary, but you can have a read because we are talking about disinvestment in general. ठीक है. Which became a full ministry in 2001. The process of disinvestment continued intermittently over the next decade, 2004-14. Since 2016, the government has given in principle approval for strategic disinvestment of 35 central public sector enterprises and or subsidiaries, units, joint ventures of CPSEs and IDBI Bank. This you can include as a fact to just explain how the government is proactively pursuing the strategic sale. In order to realize the mission of new self-reliant India, there was a need to redefine public sector participation in business enterprises and to encourage private sector participation in all the sectors. So you've justified the government stance. After 2014, the disinvestment policy was renewed with stakes in PSEs such as HPCL, REC, DCIL. These are all nothing but examples. Also, all of this is not necessary, but just because you're talking about the current status of disinvestment, you can have a read at it, which will come in with handy for your examples. The main part of the question is may affect India's economic health. Privatization is making a huge impact on the Indian economy. During COVID, government's revenue shrunk drastically, and the privatization turned out to be the central strategy for the recovery of the economy. Here we are talking about the positives. But on the other hand, too much privatization may create the monopoly of some big players, which is the negative. ठीक है, प्राइवेटाइजेशन की जिससे करप्शन आ रहा है. The biggest of the scams have often been carried out through the involvement of both private and public sectors together. It has often been witnessed that private companies bribe government officials heftily to crack big business deals. Also, this is the main demand, तो इसमें थोड़े बहुत ज़्यादा points include करने पड़ेंगे when you're talking about the positives as well as the negatives. Crony capitalism, ठीक है. However, the positive would be countering the red tapeism. ठीक है, तो ओवरऑल हम जब एलपीजी पढ़ते हैं उसमें ओवरऑल प्राइवेटाइजेशन के जो कॉन्सेप्ट्स पढ़ते हैं, पॉजिटिव्स एज वेल एज नेगेटिव्स, ग्लोबलाइजेशन वगैरह जो भी इंपेरेटिव नीड, बेसिक्स ऑफ एलपीजी यू हैव टू डिस्कस. It is paradoxical that the PSUs are evaluated by financial parameters, although they are not established for financial objectives. When the country faces economic crisis, that time non-financial parameters come and they are appreciated. When we face any such economic crisis, that time they are remembered for the non-financial contributions and they're appreciated. During the COVID-19, the FCI became the savior for the country in terms of food security, and the railways transported food grains to all parts of the country. So we've given FCI and railways good examples. So we are also concluding on a note that welfare note, social justice is still needed and PSUs are fulfilling that. ठीक है, तो ओवरऑल प्राइवेटाइजेशन नहीं करनी है, प्राइवेट प्लेयर्स को भी इम्पार्ट करना है. सो वी कैन टॉक अबाउट द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ एनपीजी. ठीक है, and then you talk about stakeholder participation as well, and you conclude on such note. So the PSUs may not have done better, but as far as strategic factors are concerned, welfare and redistribution are concerned, they remain relevant. So strategic factors, welfare and redistribution, the focus should be only to address structural challenges faced by the PSUs in India rather than only focusing on disinvestment. Yes, this is a good point कि आप other disinvestment के अलावा other reforms भी हैं उनको करिए. And some PSUs are necessary, not just privatizing is not the only solution. सो यू मेंटेन अ बैलेंस स्टैंड कि करना भी है और नहीं भी करना. तो कुछ करने में भी प्रॉब्लम नहीं है और नहीं करने में भी प्रॉब्लम है. दैट मेक सेंस. Did you understand this? I
Yes.
think the last two questions are not in as much structure, but my explanation might have put them in structure for you. If you have any doubts, you can ask me. Otherwise, I think we have taken a lot of time today as well, so we'll probably do the toppers copy in the next class.
Sir, in the introduction, we generally have to focus on the why aspect, right?
Yes, wherever you can, why aspect. But अगर जैसे 20 मार्क आता है, तो 20 मार्कर में you explain the concept as well as why.
Okay. For example,
मतलब any 20 marker concept. So if the question is on PSUs, tell what are PSUs what is PSU, and then why were the PSUs established.
okay.
ठीक है, गुड गवर्नेंस अगर आता है 10 मार्कर में, सो यू टेल अस ओनली व्हाई गुड गवर्नेंस. बट अगर इट्स आस्क्ड इन 20 मार्कर, गिव मी द डेफिनेशन ऑफ गुड गवर्नेंस एंड टेल मी व्हाई.
Okay, okay, got it.
Yes. Perfect. Any other doubts? Done. Thank you for joining in. Then we'll see you in the next class, probably the next week or the next week. ठीक है, done.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.